This is the High School Football America podcast for March the 9th, 2020. I'm Jeff Fisher. All right, we're heading to South Georgia, one of the best areas in the country when it comes to high school football. And when you talk about that area, you got to really talk about Valdosta. Two high schools there, Valdosta and Lowndes. The Wildcats of Valdosta, the winningest program all time in America when it comes to high school football victories. How good is the area? Well, last year, Lowndes finished number 16 in the High School Football America 100 national rankings. And the Cats, well, they climbed as high as number 41, owning a big victory early in the season over Colquitt County. And it was a great year. And then came the end of the year in January, and all of a sudden, things got a little topsy-turvy down in Valdosta as Alan Rodmaker, who had taken the program to a state championship in his first year. Well, the school board fired him by a vote of 5-4, and then they took another vote, and they fired him again, if you will. And it's been a mess, is the best way to put it. And we got Phil Jones from Fox Sports Radio in Valdosta reached out to me. I think it was over the weekend, and we've been thinking about something to do here and clear it up a little bit because it is a mess in America's winningest program down there. And Phil Jones, who does the afternoon sports drive talk show 4 to 6 in Valdosta, and he's also the general manager of Fox Sports Radio, is on the line right now to kind of try and clear some things up. In the land of wins, this one seems to be, Phil, maybe a big loss as it relates to the fans, because it is surely topsy-turvy down there. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate you having me on the podcast. Yeah, it's been a crazy 3 weeks since this whole thing really got going with the dismissal of Coach Rodemaker, and we have not had one boring day trying to follow this entire mess. So yeah, it's been the single craziest thing that I have ever covered, and I've been covering high school football, as I know you have, for quite some time. Yeah. And nothing comes close.
Well, and let's kind of, I gave a little bit of a synopsis, but we want to dive a little bit deeper on this. This is not a situation where Coach Rodemaker wasn't a winner, and we know the importance of football in Valdosta. So kind of set the stage here. How does a guy go from winning a state championship in his first year to being fired several years later?
Good question. And that's kind of the same question that everybody here has asked. I believe 36 and 17, I believe, is Coach Rod's record in his 4 years. That included a 12-4 mark in region play, which the region that Valdosta competes in is, of course, the Houston counties, Northside, Warner Robins, Lee County, which, of course, I think is the state champion in Georgia, Class 6A, 2 of the last 3 years. So Coach Rodemaker certainly had the record, had the winning record, had the Cats playing well. Now, a couple of things worth pointing out. Despite the overall good record and winning percentage, Coach Rod had failed to defeat the crosstown rival, the Lowndes High Vikings, 3 consecutive seasons. And then in the playoffs, the Cats made an early exit last couple of years, and it was to teams like last year, it was to Richmond Hill. Nothing against Richmond Hill, but Valdosta fans felt like that was a game that Valdosta should have won. So a couple of situations there that could have led to the ousting, but it was very much a shock when we all got the message. And for me, it was on a Tuesday night following the Valdosta City Board of Education's meeting, where they had voted 5-4 to not renew the contract to Coach Rodemaker. And I remember I got the text that night, roughly around 10 o'clock, soon after the meeting had adjourned, and word was leaking out that Coach Rod, or how the board had voted not to extend Rod's contract. And Jeff, I wound up answering calls, answering texts, talking to people until 4 a.m. That morning. And then, of course, after a couple hours sleep, it just started right back up that Wednesday morning. And to be very honest with you, Jeff, it has not stopped since then. And I'll be happy to talk about it further as far as the details. And and the who's who. Been quite a few candidates that have come through the door and have gone right out the door up to this point.
Well, it's a mess, and certainly any new coach is going to want to know what that mess is and how to fix that mess. Bill Jones is on the line, Fox Sports Radio, Valdosta in South Georgia, on the podcast, talking about a head-scratcher, as I called it at the top. Alan Rodemaker, the head coach at Valdosta, is no longer there. They not only got rid of him the night you were talking about, then they kind of went back and re-looked at it, and maybe that's the next thing we go to. So, as you said, everybody's scratching their head, trying to figure out why Coach Rod was let go right at the beginning, although you have some reasons you gave there. Now they go back a second time. I know there's lawyers involved, so set that up. What happened? Was there any hope that maybe that 5-4 dismissal vote was going to be turned around the second time?
Yeah, so the first vote came on January the 28th, and, of course, the whole community, I think the board maybe underestimated the groundswell of support that Coach Rodemaker received. And again, people were very, very outspoken. And when I say people, I'm talking about longtime Wildcat supporters. Jeff, you mentioned the fact at the onset that Valdosta is the winningest football program in the United States of America. That's not lost on these longtime Wildcat supporters who, I mean, you've got people that have not missed a game. I'm not talking about a home game. I'm talking about home and away in 20 plus years. And a lot of those people not only lend their voice, but they lend their money. Well, maybe not lend is the word, but they give their money, and they give a lot of money. And I can tell you after the first vote, people were pretty, again, outspoken, saying, you're not going to get another red dime from me ever. And to this point, they have kept that promise. So the groundswell of support was there. People were outspoken. So the board agreed to take another vote on it on February the 11th. So roughly you're talking about a couple of weeks that had passed since the previous vote. And that vote almost didn't happen. There was a motion there at the beginning to not even take a vote. And a couple of the board members resisted that. They elected to go forward with another vote. It went 5-4 against Coach Rodemaker. It is worth pointing out that the 5 board members that voted against Coach Rodemaker are all African-American. The 4 members that voted for Coach Rodemaker to renew his contract are all white members. So people can make of that what they want. And again, the supporters, and there are many for Coach Rodemaker, not just on a personal level, but again, strictly from a competitive standpoint, what he was able to do with Valdosta. I mentioned the region schedule earlier that Valdosta had maintained and had done pretty well at during Coach Rodemaker's tenure, Jeff. Coach Rod and Valdosta had elected to keep on the schedule a lot of the teams that they had built up a pretty good rivalry with. Mm-hmm. That includes Colquitt County. That includes Tift County. That includes the crosstown rival Lowndes. And all those are 7A schools. Yep. So you're talking about bigger schools, a classification higher. But Coach Rod wanted to keep those teams on the schedule. Like I said, they were the pretty good rivals of Valdosta. So not only was Valdosta playing what was the toughest, one of the toughest schedules just for the region, but going out of the region made Valdosta's schedule arguably the toughest in the state.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely agree with that. Yeah. It helps in the algorithm when we do the rankings. That's one of the reasons the Cats can get that high. I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but that's an important point that they do play that.
Yeah. So to go back and kind of close the question. So February the 11th, the second vote was taken, and again the results were the same. And I know Coach Rodemaker does have I think he has his lawyers involved in a discrimination suit. And that's where that's at. But I think any hopes of Coach Rodemaker coming back have been dashed.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go next with that question. Phil Jones is on the line, does an afternoon talk show on Fox Sports Radio in Valdosta, the afternoon sports drive 4 to 6 if you're driving through the area. Check it out. And he's talking about what's going on in the winningest city in America, no doubt about it. And then you throw Lowndes on top of that. You guys got a lot of football wins between those two schools there. And since I'm not going to ask you the question about, is there a chance, I guess we go to the next question of, you said some people have come through the door and then turned right around and walked out the door. So what's going on there in the hiring process, if you will?
Okay. So once it was, it looked fairly certain that, Coach Rodemaker had pretty much exhausted any opportunities to try to, get his job back, which were pretty futile to begin with. But hey, Coach Rod is a fighter, and he said that he was going to fight for his job, and he did. Unfortunately, again, the board didn't agree as far as him wanting to come back. So once the final or the second vote was taken, and again, it looked like we could pretty much concede that Coach Rod's tenure was done at Valdosta. Well, then the board had turned their attention to trying to find a replacement and start the interview process. And that pretty much began in earnest. I guess today would be, this is the start of the third week that we've had candidates lined up for the interview process. And pretty much every candidate has come through the door and or inquired and have had conversations with the board and the search committee. And to this point, there has been no success. Those candidates have either been dismissed. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, but we're going to move on. Or they themselves have turned down the opportunity, for a second interview. So that's, to be very honest with you, the best of my knowledge, there have been approximately 13 identifiable candidates. And as of this morning, there remains roughly 2 viable, identifiable candidates who we think remain interested in the job, and there is some interest, I think, on the board side to at least keep them in the hunt for right now.
Well, this is simply amazing and really kind of points at what kind of upheaval this caused. Obviously, Phil Jones on the line. Let me ask you this: as you kind of put out those numbers, I mean, how surprised are you? I mean, this is a coveted job. This is the winningest high school football program in America all time, 900 plus victories. You would think the line out the door would be pretty darn long.
No question, Jeff. The program speaks for itself. Its history speaks for itself. You're talking about legends that have come through and have coached Valdosta. Wright Bazemore, just to begin, Wright Bazemore, you got Nick Hyder, and the list goes on and on. 17 coaches have coached at Valdosta ever since Turner Rockwell started the program in 1912. And like I said, it is the who's who of coaching as far as people that are well known in high school football, whether it's in Georgia, South Georgia, or anywhere in the country. I tell the story, and you can probably agree with me on this. Anywhere in the country, if you got, say, a Valdosta Wildcats hat on or a T-shirt on, or if you get into a conversation and you mention that you're from Valdosta, chances are somebody, if they keep up with football, chances are somebody's going to say, "Oh, that's the place where they've got the really good football program." Yep. And how many programs can you say that about? If you can run into somebody at LAX and they'd be able to identify where you are because of the football program. Not many, of course.
There's only one, Massillon, out of Ohio. That would be it. That would be it, aside from Valdosta.
Okay. All right. Yeah, absolutely. So again, the program, its history, certainly speaks for itself. However, I think what happened with Coach Rodemaker, how it happened, it also has certainly, gained a lot of attention. And Jeff, as you know, within the coaching, community and that brethren, there, the word spreads pretty quickly. And coaches talk, and hey, Coach Rod was let go. They can't, and these are, from some of the people I think that are pretty close to the situation. And some have even interviewed have said, can't really get a solid answer on why Coach Rod was let go. And you can imagine any coach coming in, if he goes, 10-1 or 9-1, and you make the playoffs. And that was another thing about Coach Rod. In addition to having the state championship in his first year, he led the Cats to the playoffs every year thereafter. So you have to ask yourself, if you're a candidate coming in, what's it going to take for me, to be deemed successful and to keep my job. The one thing they do in Georgia, Jeff, of course, the high school coach is a teacher. Has that teaching certificate, and he, like every other non-administrative position in Georgia in the education system, is on a one-year, year-to-year renewable contract. So, in other words, your job, your position goes before the board every year, and they decide whether to renew your contract for another year to keep you on, or like it was in Coach Rodemaker's case, not to renew your contract. So that's got to be tough.
Yeah, like you said, I think the biggest thing you said there, and I think this is so true, knowing the coaching profession like we both do, people talk. And certainly there is stuff swirling around this that are being said in text messages and phone calls and all that, making it a little bit tough. Phil Jones is on the line, Fox Sports Radio in Valdosta. He's on the air from 4 to 6 in the afternoon sports drive. And, Phil, so you got this horrible thing happening on one side of the town in the Wintersville Classic, right, at Valdosta. It's a mess. And then on the other side, you've got Lowndes, who has a legend step down, and in comes a guy that I know very well who will be on the podcast tomorrow, by the way, at Lowndes, and that's Jamie DuBose, who is known as a winner in Alabama, coming to Georgia. Boy, you talk about two opposites, right?
Well, yeah, Jeff, you're absolutely right. Randy McPherson, the longtime coach at Lowndes, had indicated that he was going to resign, and when he did, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they immediately identified Coach Jamie DuBose as the guy that they wanted. They interviewed him, had an off-site interview, and he was hired. So you're right. There was you couldn't have two polar opposite scenarios with the way the Lowndes job and open coaching position was handled versus this. And again, you're talking about the winningest high school football program in the country. This is the job that most coaches would just give everything. This is the one job. Any coach will tell you, boy, if I could coach and be the head coach at Valdosta High School, then I would, you can knock one off the bucket list. I think most coaches would say that. But not in this case.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the other thing, Phil, that I think, and as I said, I've kept up with this by reading online, because that's what the internet does for you. You're able to be connected all around the world. But you know what seems to me not to ever show up in a story because of the mess of the firing of Coach Rodemaker is the kids. So can you shed a little light on that? Because you've got a winningest program in America right now without a head football coach. I'm sure they've got some interims in there and some guys doing the jobs in the weight room. But has that been talked about at all? Because that seems to be, at least from my outsider perspective, something I haven't really heard a whole lot about.
Yeah, it has been talked about. Now, the Cats are grateful to have some really good assistants. In fact, I'll mention Demario Jones, who I believe has been the director, and this may not be his exact title, but I know that most of the programs, at least here in South Georgia, the bigger schools, the 6A, 7A schools, have a head coach, but then they'll have a coach designated as a director of football operations. Mm-hmm. That really is kind of in charge of all the nuts and the bolts, the weight, making sure the kids stay on task with weightlifting, their grades, tutoring if necessary, assisting in scheduling, that kind of thing. So at Valdosta, they've got Demario Jones, who really has been the guy, along with Josh Crawford, offensive coordinator, and also considered a candidate for the job. I know those two guys in particular have done a great job of keeping everybody together, making sure the kids, stay on task. But I've also been told that the morale certainly is down a little bit. Mm-hmm. That's no reflection on what kind of job the assistants are doing. It's the reflection, though, of these kids being subjected to everything else that we're all hearing, which, does anybody really want this job? And, kids are very resilient. We know that. But at the same time, they need leadership. They want leadership. They want guidance. And that's lacking right now. That's again, not taking any kind of shot at any of the assistants. They're great men. They're great coaches. Coach Crawford and Demario Jones are. But, there needs to be a head coach because, again, these kids, they need the figurehead of a high school head football coach to lead the program. They don't have that right now.
Yeah. Phil Jones on the line, Fox Sports Radio out of Valdosta. You can check him out in the afternoons on the Afternoon Sports Drive 4 to 6. And I guess the best way to wrap this up, you kind of hinted at it a little bit earlier, which is here we are 3 weeks later, really not a long list of people in line for this job. Georgia does have spring football and all that good stuff. Where does this end? Meaning, when do you get a coach and you can kind of go on and working toward 1,000 victories?
Well, that is the $1 million question, Jeff. Again, I mentioned earlier that I believe this will begin the third week of the true active search for a coach. In other words, this will be the third week where we start off a Monday looking at, okay, who are the candidates, who's coming in for an interview. And I do want to make sure that I add, I've got, some pretty good information. I think some folks who are close to the situation who kind of fill me in. Does that mean I know everything that's going on 100%? Absolutely not. Because I'm sure there are some things that they're probably just outside the board, those 9 board members and maybe the superintendent, that nobody knows about. But for the most part, I think that what has happened, we've been pretty much on top of and been able to accurately report. So, again, you're talking about 13 candidates that collectively over the last couple of weeks and now ending the third week have been involved in this process. Again, this is Monday, kicking off the third week. We have the best, to the best of my knowledge, Jeff, we've got right now 2 or 3 viable candidates who I assume will be interviewed at some point today, tomorrow. I'll add this. So going back a couple of weeks ago, the initial plan was for interviews to begin and be done on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, with the hopes of a decision being made, say, on that Thursday or Friday. Well, that went into last week. You've got the next scheduled board meeting tomorrow night. So the plan all along was to take a couple of weeks and be ready to have a candidate that the superintendent could take to the board and recommend to be hired. That's the way the process works, of course. Mm-hmm. Superintendent does the interviewing. Superintendent feels like, hey, we've got our guy. I'm going to take this to the board. I'm going to recommend that and I do want to add too, going back for a second, to Coach Rodemaker, the superintendent of Valdosta, Dr. Todd Kaysen, had indeed recommended to the board that they renew the contract of Coach Rodemaker.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes. I think that's important to point out.
Interesting.
And usually, Jeff, the board will go with the superintendent's recommendation, but only that they did not in that case.
Mm-hmm.
So again, though, given the current state of affairs, that process would, of course, still remain the same. The superintendent will go to the board, recommend a candidate that he feels is worthy of being named the next head coach, and then, of course, the board will take a vote on it. And I know that they had wanted to have that done and ready to announce a new head coach at Valdosta with the next board meeting, which again is tomorrow night. And unless there is, to use some football vernacular and how appropriate here, Jeff,
mm-hmm.
unless there is a Hail Mary, I don't see that happening.
Well, that's where I was going to go next, because what is does your school board, where I'm from in Pennsylvania, it varies from every 2 weeks to a month. I mean, what does the regularly scheduled board meeting look like? So in other words, if they don't get it done with that Hail Mary tomorrow night, are they waiting another month? Can they do an emergency meeting to hire the coach? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, so they meet twice a month, I believe it is.
Okay.
I believe it's the second and I guess the fourth Tuesday. And don't quote me on that, but I think that's the case. So, I would think that if there's not a coach ready to be named by tomorrow, then they would then shoot for the following board meeting. Which would be another 2 weeks.
And then just kind of the what if, as you said, Coach Rodemaker is kind of done with his hopes. I mean, there's probably, like you said, the legal thing that's going to go on there that's completely different to him remaining as the head coach. But what do you think it's going to be? I'm sure when they get to the point where they're going to vote on a new head coach, how do you think the community is going to turn out at that? Or do you think they're just going to be, okay, we're going to wait back and see? Or do you think there's going to be some more activity at the school board meeting?
Well, listen, this thing has certainly captured the attention of those that, of course, have always been regular attendees of the board meetings. But now, above and beyond that, you've got the attention of practically everyone. And, of course, I know that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I'll tell you just how impactful this whole thing is. The last board meeting they had to move it to the Performing Arts Center, which is located at the old campus of Valdosta High. They just recently built a new high school. Valdosta High School did. But they've maintained the Performing Arts Center building at the previous location, which it's fine. It's in good condition. But they moved the last board meeting to that location. It was packed. And I would assume that the seating capacity is probably around, I would say 800, maybe just a little bit less than 1,000. I'm just guessing there. And I would assume that, and I haven't heard this, but I would think that the next board meeting would have to be held at another separate location.
In the stadium.
Well, you never know the way this thing is going. But no. It has gotten the attention of if they follow sports, and of course a lot of people do, some more thoroughly, and some are more passionate about it than others. We know that. But, I mean, let's face it. In a year, what are the most, highly attended, meetings in the public, whatever that is. And, of course, it's high school football. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nowhere else are you going to have, 10, 11, 12,000 people gathered in one venue in one 3-hour period. So it's got the attention of everyone. Everyone is certainly keeping up with this thing, and it has been understood by many people, Jeff. And I think that even I believe the superintendent is on the record for saying this. Now, again, I'm not exactly sure of that, but everyone to a man agrees that this is the most important hire in Valdosta high school football history. That's
a big statement. That is a very big statement.
It is. And again, I don't, but I don't think it is a big statement, but I don't think it's overstating it, because you're talking about a very fragile community right now that has been wounded. The psyche is very fragile right now because of the way the vote went. Those are A lot of people questioning, what was the motive? If there's something that we don't know, then tell us. And I think the ambiguity and the lack of knowledge, the lack of knowing the real reasons why, the assumptions made as to why Coach Rod was let go, which I briefly mentioned that earlier, when you take a look at how the vote went and who voted how. And there's just a lot of things now that have made this probably a lot bigger than it should be. And I don't mean to understate the importance of the hire at all, but I mean, it's whoever it would be, under any circumstances, is going to be an important decision. I mean, again, it's the head football coach.
Right.
But given what I've explained to you, and that's just barely scratching the surface, Jeff, for those and a lot of other reasons, it's going to, this is going to be a very, very important hire, because I'll tell you this. Not only do you have to have a guy that's good at the X's and O's, that's the obvious, but you've got to have a guy that's going to be able to rally this community, who's going to have to go out and get this support back. He's going to have to go to the old school supporters and say, look, I understand that you have withdrawn your support, and you said that that's going to be, forever. But I need you. This program needs you. These kids need you. And that's what this community, really, this football program is going to have. You're going to have a guy that not only knows the X's and O's and how to draw up a great game plan, but you got to have a guy now who's got to draw up a great game plan for simply gaining the trust back within the Valdosta Wildcat support.
It's got to be a salesman. That's huge. That is absolutely huge. And then I'll leave with this little statement, and you can go off of the statement. So you mentioned that Coach Rodemaker had trouble there beating the crosstown rivals in the Wintersville Classic, right? And that was one of the reasons, losing 3 in a row. What happens to the new head coach that doesn't get it done against Lowndes in 2020?
That's a great question. I will add this. The talent, the cupboard is not bare at Valdosta. In fact, you've got some pretty good talent that's coming back. Valdosta did lose Tate Rodemaker, who, yes, that's the coach's son, who signed with Florida State University. He broke just about every passing record on the books at Valdosta, and you're talking about a lot of great signal callers that have come through Valdosta. John Lastinger, Buck Ballou, John Bond, and the list goes on and on. So even with that, though, you've got a couple of probably the top 2 receivers in the region, if not the state. So point being, the cupboard is not bare. Whoever takes the job is going to have a great team to coach. But again, there is so much more that is going to have to come from, and it's going to be expected from whomever the new head coach is going to be. And right now, we are not anywhere close to knowing who that is.
Well, it's a shame because, as I said at the top, one of the best spots for high school football in America. I feel pretty confident in saying on the public school side, it may be the best. The Trinity Leagues in Southern California, the Big North in New Jersey, the Washington Catholic Athletic Conference, those are great football areas, but this is public schools, and I think you guys have a pretty good hold on the top spot there. Phil, we really appreciate you joining us and shedding a little bit of light on it. Quite honestly, as not only a supporter of high school football, it's a little disheartening that it's at this point, because it's supposed to be about the kids and teaching kids lessons. And I don't know if this is necessarily the best lesson to teach kids, but you've done a great job of lining things up for us tonight and then kind of giving us your opinion on it. So we appreciate your time.
Absolutely, Jeff. But again, thanks so much for having me.
Again, thanks to Phil Jones of Fox Sports Radio in Valdosta, Georgia. He's on the afternoon sports drive, 4 to 6 during the weekdays, so check him out. And we mentioned during the start of the podcast that Lowndes finished number 16 in the High School Football America national rankings last year. Valdosta climbing as high as number 41 in the national rankings before a regular season loss and a earlier than expected exit from the postseason. Back in 2016, when they won the state championship, the Cats finishing number 30 in the High School Football America national rankings. You've been listening to the High School Football America podcast. I'm Jeff Fisher.